I have no idea how many people will watch this video because I believe this is the day after Christmas, but the night it came out, Jill and I watched The Matrix Resurrections. I almost said Revolutions. This sequel was, I suppose, decades away from the original release of these movies. I can understand why maybe there would not be a ton of excitement for it. However, this is a movie that I want to say a couple things about before we even get into. First off, if somebody doesn't like this movie based off of the merits of the film, the acting, the writing, where they took the plot, cinematography, stuff like that, I respect that. That's fine. But one thing I've noticed with this movie is that it was really piled on pre-release by a lot of people who, while I'm not going to name names, I really think we're using the movie as almost a political thing. Now, I think it's probably pretty obvious where I stand on different issues politically if you listen to this channel and Let's Play channel and I suppose read into some of the stuff I've said. But I find it ridiculous that this movie was ever called woke. Now look, I'm the first person to call out things that I think are garbage, okay? When the Tim Drake bisexuality comic was written, not to keep bringing this up, I was one of the few people on here who wanted to say that was horribly written. Okay, and I got tons of shit for that. I got called sexist. Somebody threw racist in there. I don't know how, because Tim Drake's white, unless I'm just colorblind now. I got called a homophobe, etc. It went on and on for like a good month, okay?
And now, regardless of those statements being true...
Yeah, basically. Basically, that's what Twitter will run with. This movie's not woke, okay? If we're talking Ghostbusters, the all-female Ghostbusters, which is terribly written with tons of, like, man-hating jokes or whatever you want to call it.
And is being feminist just to be in headlines?
Yes, okay?
Not because they actually care.
If we want to call stuff like that out, I'm perfectly on board with that. There's nothing like that in The Matrix, and that's what I wanted to get to with that before we get into this review, is I've seen so many people disingenuously call this movie woke, or say that it destroys the legacy of Neo or The Matrix, which, by the way, most of the people saying that hate Matrix 2 and 3 anyway, so I don't know what legacy you're talking about. Going into this, I love all three Matrix movies and the Animatrix. Jill has not seen the Animatrix when we record this, but she also loved all three of the original Matrix films.
They're my favorite.
In fact, I think you said 3 might be your favorite out of them.
Yeah, I loved 3. I absolutely loved the ending.
And most people hate 3 for whatever reason.
Well, that's because they have bad taste.
Although if you actually go online and gauge the opinions on things like Rotten Tomatoes and stuff from audience, most people don't hate 3. It's just the vocal minority hates 2 and 3.
Speaking of minorities,
oh no.
I just want to bring up the fact that before this movie even came out, there was only a couple of trailers. People watched those trailers and decided that this movie was going to be super woke and super, like, overly liberal, like, super far left. Just because, in my opinion, I think people were just saying that because there's some black actors and because there's a girl who in The Matrix has blue hair. And now I'm not trying to call a lot of people racist here. I just kind of think that it's a little bit of a coincidence that, you know, after seeing a couple of trailers with a couple of black people and a girl with really short blue hair, that people kind of jumped the gun and were like, oh, this must be a movie for liberals because it's got people of different races in it and a girl who has hair that is for some reason associated with the LGBTQ community.
Well, yeah, so the pixie cut and short colored hair has been by conservative people largely associated with that stuff, even though there are conservative people who have short colored hair as well.
Yeah.
I get the meme. And I know that we've kind of gone on about this point for a while, but what I'm getting at with this is we did not go into this movie ready to love it or hate it. I went into this movie nervous about it, okay? Hoping it would not ruin a film trilogy I really liked, or retcon it out, or make it not canon, or any of that garbage, or shove a political narrative down my throat that the originals didn't have. And by the way, they did have political narratives in the originals.
But that's the point we're trying to make here is, like, people saw these trailers and saw these sort of people in that and then decided that there must be some sort of political underlying narrative talking about, like, far left stuff.
I don't think it helped that Lena Wachowski now, I think it's Lena or Lana, I don't know how to pronounce it, is trans.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm just saying I don't think that helped, because I think that it's been so long that it's worth mentioning that that Wachowski sister used to be a man and now is a woman, and I have even seen people say things like the Wachowski sisters were better writers when they were brothers. Like, people have taken this movie and turned it into what they turn everything into, which is like me versus them. When really this movie, it's not about liberalism or conservatism. It has the same themes as the originals, like slavery, free will, the fact that a lot of people would rather be distracted from their lives than engage in the hard things that happen in their lives. Those are the themes of the original Matrix movies, Matrices. And I would say that the only expansion of that goes beyond what it was is just the idea that there are many people who are actively choosing now at this point in the Matrix to ignore the signs that it's fake.
There was also some themes of mental illness in the beginning of the movie concerning Neo, too. A lot of the writing and the themes that were in this movie and in the rest of the series were deep and had a lot of, well, what felt like good meanings to me, and it felt like they had things to make you think a lot, and it kind of felt like people who just watched the trailer and decided they weren't going to like this movie are missing out on a lot of deep narratives that Lana put a lot of heart into, I feel like.
When I said that I like this movie, and by the way, I need to say this to Jill because she's going to jump in here immediately, we're going to do no spoilers for the next few minutes, okay?
Okay.
And then we're going to talk the actual specific story. But I noticed that when on Twitter I said I enjoyed this movie, there were people jumping down my throat about it, about how it was bad, about how I shouldn't like it, blah, 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 blah. Like, people sought out to dislike this movie. In terms of, if I went on Spider-Man No Way Home as a tag on Twitter and I just tore down anybody who said anything positive about it, it was like that kind of bullshit about this movie. So I don't take anyone seriously who called this movie woke. I think you'd either have to be just outright stupid or disingenuous to think that, and I'm hoping that it was like stupidity.
Well, to me it feels like if they watched the movie, it feels like they didn't understand anything that went on into it.
And if this is your definition of woke, so is the original.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, in the original movie, the only reason Neo becomes the One, gets back up and fights the agents and actually becomes the Jesus Christ figure of that story is because Trinity kisses him, okay? If you want to interpret things like that, the strong, independent man couldn't do it without the woman saving him and making out with him and bringing him back to life, okay? You can read this into anything, okay? If we look at anything like this, I'm sure we can read whatever the hell we want to in it. But this series, those themes it has are about slavery, they're about free will, choice, predeterminism, love. You know, I would say that this movie fully establishes the Matrix quadrilogy as a love story. That is what it is. And
and I think a lot of that was the point. I think people are missing the big point too, and thinking that it's all just about race and sexuality and all of this dumb stuff, which is what they've decided is wokeism now. When, like, a while ago, you know, it was normal to see people of different colors in movies, and nobody thought it was like some sort of political underlying like conspiracy thing.
I know, and I go both ways on this, because like, if you're the person who has so little going on in your life that you need to go into every movie reading your politics into it, I think you need to go outside. But also, if you're the person on the opposite side who won't see a movie because the lead is a white cisgender male or because there's not enough gay people in it or whatever, you also need to go outside, okay? The movie was never about that. This movie, like I said, it establishes the Matrix as a love story. This is something Jill pointed out to me. If you look at the themes of 1, 2, and 3, that is basically what it's all about. It was never just Neo. It was never just the One. It was about Neo and his importance through Trinity. And if you have a problem with that, then you have a problem with the original trilogy, or you misunderstood it. And if you don't have a problem with that, then this movie should be no different to you, because this movie is very focused on that connection between Neo and Trinity. I would say this is almost a character study, like character building up movie about Neo and Trinity's relationship specifically.
And I loved it for that. And, you know, there was something I actually said to you that I thought was an interesting concept, was how they were always calling Neo the One. And I kind of always thought, like, they put a lot of binary code sort of things into the Matrix and into, like, you know, the green lines that come down are all ones and zeros and stuff. For me, it kind of felt like Trinity was the zero, and that together they had to be together in order to help fix everything, and that it couldn't just be one without the other. And Trinity was also the reason why, when he went to go see the architect for the first time, it's the reason why he didn't make the same decision as all the other ones and mess up and have everything reset again.
Right.
Because it was different this time, because he had love, he had someone he cared about. And I feel like people acting like Trinity all of a sudden, like, didn't matter as much as Neo when this movie came out is just really dumb. It kind of feels like they didn't understand the point of love in all of the other movies that they tried to build up to.
I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I've always thought that the reason a lot of people did not connect with 2 and 3 is they lack the simplicity of 1. And I'm not saying that, like, you're a moron if you don't like 2 and 3. I'm 100% sure there are many people that don't like Reloaded and Revolutions for plot reasons. Like, maybe they don't like the random side quests Neo goes on.
I like them.
Maybe they don't like how long the exposition is to get to the philosophical point with things like the discussion with the architect or the oracle. That's fine. You don't like the pacing or the cinematography. Or a fair complaint I've seen is that some of the CGI in Reloaded especially didn't age the best. Like, you can tell when it's fake. Mm-hmm. I understand those criticisms and I respect them, like I said before, but I think that this movie stands in a weird spot in its philosophy between 1 and 2 and 3. This movie is the most like 1. You know, I know people who did not like 2 and 3 who saw this and liked it specifically because it was more like 1. When you do that, though, you also run the risk of, if you continue past this point, you kind of recap some stuff, you do some new things, you run the risk of being called the Force Awakens of the franchise, and then you ask where you go from there. So I guess my big concern with this movie at the end of it, without getting into spoilers quite yet, was where they will go from here, if they go anywhere. But if this is the end of the franchise, which I personally could see it being very easily because of the box office with their stupid ass HBO Max dual release, which was never a good idea, never helped any movies, I think this is a good place that you could end the movies.
Yeah, it had a really good ending.
I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't compromise, like, and that's the main thing I wanted to say is I got out of it what I wanted. The characters I wanted to show up in some capacity did. I got the answers I wanted for what's happened to the world since the last movie, mm-hmm. and it did not retcon or ruin any previous movie. The consequences of those movies all mattered. Mm-hmm. It respected them. It did not take the easy path and decanonize 2 and 3, which a lot of movies would have done at this point.
Yeah.
I respect how they handled everything, even if there were some minor things I'd maybe change here or there.
Can I go on my tangent about how much I love the movie now with spoilers?
Yeah, I think this is something fun for everyone, no matter what type of Matrix film you liked. So, that's kind of me.
So, first of all, I absolutely loved this movie. I loved pretty much everything about it because, I don't know, it felt like such a good continuation of the series that I already fell in love with. And one of the reasons for that is because in the beginning, it really fucks with your brain. Like, it makes you think that they're going to just, like, get rid of all of this stuff and that, like, all the last movies were just video games. And it has a lot of parallels to real life that I noticed that the director put in there. She probably put in because she felt like that in real life. Like, there's mentions of them saying, well, we're gonna make a Matrix 4 with or without you and stuff like that to Neo because he's the video game designer of the Matrix. And they had, like, a thing where they were like, we need to revolutionize this again and have a new bullet time. And then in this movie, it seemed like they put in a part with the architect.
The analyst, the new architect.
Yes, yeah. The new architect, the analyst, who he is able to make Neo not be, like, he slows down time, sort of, and he makes it so Neo can't get to Trinity, and that makes sense because he's walking so slowly. You'd have to see the scene and understand it, but I just found a lot of those parts in the beginning to be very interesting, and how they made him feel like he was going crazy and how he was just having another episode and how he had to go to the therapist who had blue glasses just like the blue pills he had to take. And then when you finally meet Morpheus, he's wearing a red outfit, just like the red pill, and how he's the real reality. And I liked that a big majority of the movie was about how his relationship with Trinity and his love for her was so strong that it withstood so many years of brainwashing and being torn apart from each other, because pretty much what happens is, you know, like, they're put back together from their bodies. I mean, I assume if you're watching the spoiler part, you've seen the movie. You know, they are kind of separated in the Matrix because they need both Trinity and Neo to have the Matrix, you know, be alive.
Right, when they recreated the Matrix, because it's worth noting that there was a lot of events between, you know, where we started and now. There was a short machine civil war, and there was a power restructure, and the analyst recreated the Matrix. He did it differently. It was no longer one singularity or one anomaly. That's what the one was before, okay? It was two. It was essentially the one plus his partner, which was Trinity.
Because their connection was so strong together, and
right.
And in a lot of ways, she sparked life into him and sparked his powers into him. And I think a lot of people missed a lot of those points, that the reason that why Neo was so strong is because he had her, and he had something to fight for, and he had love. And that the two of them together are the reason why they were able to save the world the first time. You know, like, yeah. Neo couldn't have done any of it without her. There's so many different scenes in which you see that, you know, like the scene where she kisses him back to life, the scene where she dies for him,
the scene, yeah, where she right before that flies him to the Machine City because he couldn't see correctly.
Yeah, there's so many scenes, and then you get more of those scenes in this movie where you see Trinity playing the video game The Matrix in The Matrix, and she sees herself in that video game character, even though herself in The Matrix looks completely different, you know, because she sees who she used to be and starts to remember a little bit, like, all of those past events, and she says that it feels like a memory to her. And a big part of this entire movie is just a really wonderful love story of them being able to come back together and remembering each other no matter what, and that their love was strong enough to overcome every single thing that tore them apart. And there's this one scene that I absolutely love in the movie where they are in this cafe, and they're trying to reach for each other, and their hands are trying to, like, come together, but all of these other people from the Matrix are pulling them apart, and it just kind of looked like a Renaissance painting to me, and I felt like that scene in particular had so much meaning and love to it. Then by the end of the movie, Trinity is the one who finds out that she has power to fly because Neo didn't believe in himself yet, and Trinity does. By the end of the movie, Trinity believes in herself and is able to have the powers, you know, that Neo also has.
Right. So in this version of the Matrix, she's sort of also really connected to the one. They almost, that's the thing, people read into this so poorly. When I talk about these things, it's such a tight rope for me to walk to not just call everybody who misinterpreted this movie stupid, because I don't really think they are. I just think a lot of people either didn't want to understand,
or they didn't understand what love was.
Yeah, or they didn't understand at least how this movie presents love, and how the previous movies did. Like, if you didn't see 2 and 3 ever, I don't think you'd understand this movie either. So in that way, it's weird how it's like a sequel to 1, but also very clearly a sequel to 2 and 3.
Which is something I loved about it.
And it has to be. The thing that I will say with this movie, like, in terms of the things I loved, other than what you talked about, because I don't want to just recap all of that, is Smith. Now, the way that they handled Neo and Smith in this movie, it was not quite as personal and not quite as drawn out as in 2 and 3. It reminded me more of 1, where they're sort of opposing forces, but you can tell how characters have gone through changes since this version of the Matrix happened. Now, this version of the Matrix essentially has the anomaly, the one still, except it's not just one person anymore, it's Neo and Trinity, like we said.
Kind of like ones and zeros.
Right. Now, what I don't understand is if this version of the Matrix reverts to the previous version, because they said that it would eventually without, you know, Trinity and Neo powering it.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if that will still happen or if it won't, because they're both still alive, even though they're not in the tower anymore. These are complicated questions with the movie that I don't know if the answers are even that important. But with all of this, I do like how they showed that characters did die and were reborn differently. Neo was reborn in a way where deep down, he still believed in himself. He still had this faith in himself, but he didn't know why, and he didn't know why he wanted to escape, to the point where he walked off a ledge and did fly, and the machines purposely pulled him back and rewrote his mind again so that he wouldn't do that. But then that starts the character journey of Bugs. Bugs is one of my favorite parts of this movie. She is a new character.
She was one of my favorite parts of this movie, too. She's the girl with the blue hair that everyone thought was liberal, but she's not, she's not super woke or liberal. She's just an Asian girl with blue hair.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this character. This reminded me of the stronger characters from the Animatrix, the side characters that are kind of existing in that universe. And the story of how she got started on her journey is really interesting because it reminds me of the story of Kid in the original Animatrix or some of the other characters, where there is a point in the Bible, and a lot of things are based on the Bible in these movies and other religions like Hinduism and Buddhism and stuff. Jesus kind of goes around visiting people and showing them his power, and they start to believe in him as Christ in the Bible. And that's, the story of the Bible, essentially, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the Gospels, and Acts, again. Those stories in the Animatrix, where the one specifically where people encounter Neo, which I believe is mainly just Kid's story, and also the stories kind of where he was going around and helping people and freeing minds, which they reference in Reloaded, where they spent sort of almost a year, maybe 6 months, going around freeing minds and stuff with the One.
Kind of like Miracles.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. Now, this movie is very much more like Acts. It's more like Christ coming back after and still performing those miracles essentially after his rebirth, right? They do very clearly draw a lot of heavy-handed themes from the Bible in that way, in good ways and ways that probably will, I don't know, maybe annoy some people who don't like that stuff.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people who aren't too into learning about different religions and stuff probably won't get a whole lot out of all of these movies.
Well, luckily they don't say Christmas in this movie. They say Science-mas. So no atheists have to walk away super triggered to see their own analyst. But what I'm getting to with all of this is these themes are sort of mirrored still. Like, this doesn't feel like a jammed-in chapter. It does feel like the next evolutionary logical step in the franchise. And the characters that come back, because I should circle around, I mentioned Smith and I never said anything about him. Those characters make sense for why they are the way they are. Like, for example, Smith was also torn apart by the system and rebooted, but when they brought Neo back, Smith came back too. We don't know how, if that was on purpose or not, but Smith says specifically that when he came back, the machine's idea was to brainwash him and essentially put him near Neo so that they didn't have any issues, but they still interacted because those two forces also needed each other. A lot of this movie is about yin and yang. It is about Smith and Neo, good and evil. It is about Neo and Trinity, the love connection between those and how all these things balance each other. I love the way that, I believe his name is Jonathan Groff, who played Smith in this movie. I love the way he did it. I love how he was able to sort of channel a Hugo Weaving, but you can see the actual character development in him. Now, would I love to see Hugo back? Yes, but the way that they evolved Smith into like his next natural form, like he calls Neo, instead of Mr. Anderson, he starts calling him Tom.
But I love the part where he remembers who he was and everything that happened, and he goes, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, and he picks up the gun.
Yeah, and it's such an incredible moment, and it's shot really, I don't know, powerfully.
But at the point of the movie, you as a moviegoer are like, is he just having an episode? Like, was he nuts the whole time? Like, this didn't actually happen?
Yeah, and that was so incredible too to watch, because the first time you watch it, you're sitting there like, is this just all in his head, or is this something that's going to lead up to him actually realizing that the Matrix was real, or are they just going to say that the Matrix wasn't real at all and that was just some man's crazy delusions, you know? And I'm really glad that they did go the route of saying that the Matrix was real after all and there was a real world.
Well, and everybody sort of gets their ending. Neo gets his ending. He's back. He's still that Christ-like figure who doesn't fully believe in himself all the time, but he does.
And he's still powerful.
Yeah, he is still powerful. He's just as powerful as before, okay? In the ending, they show both him and Trinity fly off. So in the end, essentially, it's like Neo has sort of passed that on to her as well, in a lot of ways, because of what she was able to do for him. He gave back, subconsciously to her, through the anomaly, what she gave him originally, hope, right? Belief in herself, all that stuff. They're both kind of probably the one, but there's no longer just one, there's two, okay?
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that the only reason there was ever a one in the first place was all part of the machine control. Neo was not actually special for being the one. people misinterpret that so much.
He made himself special, and Trinity made him special.
Neo was never special for being the one, because you know why he was the one in the original movies? Because the machines were like, let's compile all of the glitches and system admin data privileges into one human, make him the Jesus of these people, and then control him so that we can keep winning the war over and over again and control them.
And get rid of all of the anomalies. Like, all of the people who wanted to escape the Matrix, they're able to just kill and get rid of.
Right, they would reset the Matrix every time. The one would bring the data back to the source, okay? This was what he was going to do in Reloaded. He'd bring the data back to the source, the Matrix would be rebooted, it would kick out all anomalies, all glitches, everything, and the Matrix would be rebuilt better each time. So the Matrix that Neo was in was already an improved version of the last 4 or 5 of them. I think he's the 6th one, or the 7th, I don't remember. But they were using the one to control humans, to control their energy source, to continually reboot the system and reboot Zion, so Zion could not get more powerful than the machines could handle, and so that they could always have that hope, so that those who wanted to get out of the Matrix would have somewhere to go temporarily, they could round them all up over the course of a generation, mass extinct them, do it again.
Yeah.
So they were letting those minds get free before. Neo's choices had lasting consequences in that now the people who are free are actually free, not to just be wiped out again. Okay, that's something important. There is peace now. You see, there are machines living among humans, and there's sort of a cross society type thing like that, but there's still these systems of control out there. And when they show all of this stuff, like I said, it really does seem like the next logical step for the series, and Smith is no different too with all of that stuff, and also how they have him interact with Neo now, and he gets his own ending. Like, Neo got his ending with Trinity, Trinity got her ending with Neo.
And Smith finally got to be free and not be anybody's slave anymore.
And that's what's really interesting, is Smith kind of goes off and you don't know if he's going to be a problem or not. But you can tell that he doesn't really hate Neo anymore, which is interesting.
Because Neo set him free.
Twice.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have that strong hatred, it doesn't seem like, of humanity. He more just wants to go do his own thing. I like that progression of Smith. If you were going to bring him back, I think that that's kind of where you had to go, versus he's just a megalomaniac again. I don't think you could go down the same exact character development for each character. And what I like about this movie is that they're able to sell me on the endings for every character. Neo, Trinity, even Morpheus, even though his is off screen. Smith, all these characters, and Bugs, the new characters they introduce, without it feeling preachy or forced or like we just brought this back just to bring this back. I didn't really feel like that at all during this movie. And I think that that's probably the most disingenuous take to me, other than the movie's woke, is the movie didn't have to be made, because none of these movies did. I've never understood what this means. If you end at a perfect point, do you get what I'm saying here? If you end at a perfect point, like, boom, book is closed, perfect story, I understand that argument. Nobody thought that. The same people who are complaining about why was this movie made, it never had to be made, are the same people who hated the ending of 3. This movie was made for you.
Yeah.
This movie was made to give you the ending you wanted.
Yeah.
Do you understand, like, what I'm saying? Like,
the end of the movie in particular was about them being able to make the universe their own and make the Matrix their own.
Yeah,
really. And that was like the one thing in the first movie that everyone loved for some reason.
Right, everybody liked that ending of the first movie. That's how they wanted it, and this movie ends that way.
Yeah.
This movie sort of writes out a lot of the things you didn't like about the Matrix while keeping them canon. And that's what I don't understand with this movie is, if anything, the people who hated 2 and 3 should be overwhelmingly happy by how this ended, how it was presented, and what it did with the characters. And it seems like they're the ones who are still mad.
And it seems like the ones like us who loved all 3 movies and now love this one are the same people with so many mouthfuls to talk about just how much we enjoyed this movie and all of the things that we noticed and saw in it, and all of the parallels and connections we have to real life and the Bible and all of these other things. I think they had, I don't know, they just put so many wonderful, meaningful connections into all of these movies, and especially this last one, that it made me feel like I had more things to think about for my own life, and it made me want to become a better person.
Right, and it did what the originals were trying to do, which was make you think.
Yeah, and the thing with Bugs in particular is Trinity couldn't have come back to the real world and, just pretty much come back to the real world and continue living, like, without being in a lie in the Matrix without her. Like, they needed Bugs to do that for multiple reasons. And it made me happy that they even gave, what felt like some just normal girl a hero moment, too. Because it showed that, you can be just some person and make a huge difference in the world.
Yeah, I just think it's sad that everybody went into this movie wanting to read into it what they wanted to read into it, and I think a lot of people doubled or tripled down after it came out because
they didn't want to go back on their opinion.
Yeah, you look stupid if you're wrong or something like that.
Which is dumb to me.
I've never understood that. If this movie came out and I didn't like it, I'd be here telling you how shit it is. Mm-hmm. Because to me, those movies mean more than they do to a lot of people. Uh-huh. And I find those movies significantly better than a lot of people do, the originals. So I went in with something to lose. Do you know what I mean? I went in worried that they were going to ruin it. I went in a little cynical, like I'm excited that they made an R movie, but please don't let them wreck something I love. Uh-huh. And I'm glad they didn't. This was not... And the last thing I was going to say about the ending is this is not the cursed child of the franchise, okay? No matter how you feel about that, this is not... Harry Potter's story was perfect. Why the hell would you continue it with Cursed Child and Fantastic Beasts? Leave it the hell alone. This wasn't that. Nobody felt that way. I mean, you and I did. We loved the first 3 movies. Mm-hmm. But most people left 3 like, I hate this ending. I don't understand it. Why is it just a very obvious Christ monologue at the very end? Like, that doesn't seem that deep to me. Like, they left not liking those things. And this movie doesn't go back on them, but it progresses from that point to where you wanted it to go in a lot of ways, or where people acted like they wanted it to go. But I feel like people are way too prideful to accept what this movie was in that regard. And I will say, finally, like I said, if you don't like it for the story and that stuff, that's fine. I'm not coming after those people, but I'm just saying the people who went into this with a complete misunderstanding of the original movies and reading politics into it, they were never going to like it to begin with.
It just makes me sad that a lot of people also don't have the capacity to go stand up and say, hey, I was wrong about this movie. It's not, super woke, and, maybe I don't like it all that much, but it's not what everyone else made it out to be, and I was wrong. Because there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you look stupid. It makes you look truthful. It makes people believe in you more.
Yeah, and I think the person whose opinion I respected the most out of this whole thing was Alex, Podcast Now. He's a friend of ours. He reviewed this on Podcast Now Plus, and his take was basically he didn't think it was great or bad. He thought it was fine, and he didn't think it was woke. And before the movie, he even told, he even said on Twitter, which this is not to throw him under the bus, but he even said, it does look like it's going to be a disaster from everything everyone's saying. Like, everybody's saying it's going to be woke. I hope it's not this political preachy crap, but if it is, man, that's going to be a cluster. And he even said that multiple times, and he just straight up starts his review, and I respect him the hell out of him for this, by basically saying, look, this movie was not woke. He still didn't like it that much, but it wasn't what he went into it thinking it was going to be from all those people saying it. Mm-hmm. I wish more people had done that, because if you don't like the movie on its merits, that's fine. But if I go into Spider-Man No Way Home because I don't like socialism, and I bring out a checklist of like how I can find socialism in everything in the movie, of course I'm going to walk away with some checklist I read super deeply into and not like the movie, because I'm not there for the movie. I'm there for personal affirmation and confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's how you should go into really anything.
And you're there to just be negative too. Like, why do people want to go watch something that's supposed to be entertaining and fun and be like, yeah, well, that was big and stupid and shitty and I didn't like it.
Well, but if you go into the movie wanting to hate it, you're gonna hate it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I'm trying to say is, it's not leaving with fair criticisms of the movie, like pacing or cinematography. Those are fair things to talk about. There were too many close-up shots during the action of this movie. I like stuff like that. I think those are fair critiques of the movie, and pacing and plot and stuff, fine, but I just don't think the way people handled this movie was fair at all.
At the end of the day, my favorite thing about this movie was the theme of their love pretty much saving the world. and that no matter what, they're always going to be together. No matter what sort of thing stands between them, whether it's brainwashing or machines or anything like that. It was something that kind of made me tear up because it made me think of us, and it made me happy to think, that don't open your eyes like that.
Uh-oh.
It made me happy to think that there's another person in this world who also sees love the same way I do, and that it is something that is unwavering and goes on forever and can't be broken easily, and is something that is so powerful that it can save worlds.
All right, you've had your say. We're at almost 40 minutes. You're not getting another Christmas present out of this with all this sappy stuff.
The people who wrote this movie, in a weird way, kind of wrote it for me, and it was something that I just really enjoyed.
This is a movie that if this is the end of the franchise, I'm very happy with it. If this is the end of Neo's story and they do make that prequel set before the version of the Matrix that Thomas Anderson Neo was in, which would take place before the original, and that's well written without him, I'm fine with that too. I'm cautious about continuing it because I don't know where you could take it, but it is left open-ended enough that there are plot lines that could keep going. I don't think there will be more because of the box office, between people misinformation spreading, like the woke garbage narrative. HBO Max has hurt pretty much every movie that launched on it and in theaters at the same time.
That's why we're going to the theater to see it too.
Yes. But if there is more and it's written like this, I will be very happy to watch it, no matter what it is. But if this is the end of the Matrix, I'm very happy with what we got. But this does feel like a natural conclusion to Neo's story, or at least the end of this chapter. It could go on. It doesn't have to. I love it the way it is. So, thank you, Jill, by the way, for doing this with me. I don't think it would be as good without you. But we appreciate you very much. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. We're always interested to see that. We hope you have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay slay!